We'll call the meeting to order. If you'd all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have under number 3 for the agenda, I have one deletion. Number 9, contract award for the water pollution control plant. We are not ready for that item tonight. So if we could remove that item. So number 9 becomes the water infrastructure, 10 is the Eversource proposal, and so forth.
All right, I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda with that item number 9 removed and the others renumbered accordingly.
Thank you, Jim. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded
Rick,
by,
second.
who made the second? Rick Shaw.
Rick.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Everyone is here. And the next item would be approval of the budget workshop minutes for May 19, 2020. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it. Ralph will second Mike's first motion.
Mike made the motion, seconded by Ralph. Any changes, errors, omissions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item is the meeting of May 20, 2020, the workshop. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
By Jim Tripp. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rick Shar. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. And the last for the minutes is the regularly scheduled meeting of May 20, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll
By
second
Jim.
it. Ralph will
Seconded
second it.
by Ralph. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item is communications and correspondence. And we do have some information that we want to share. The first item I want to share is I had gotten a message from Portland Little League, the president of Portland Little League. And it's not a decision for tonight, but it will be a decision going forward. And that is in terms of what the governor determines for youth sports, organized sports for the summer. We expect that there'll be some additional changes to his executive orders under the COVID-19, probably at the end of June. So middle to end of June. I indicated to the president of Little League that we typically follow the governor's rules. As they change, we do our best to implement them, and there would be no need for a special town meeting in order to follow the governor's rules. And I also said that you, the Board of Selectmen, are the re-entry committee. So any decisions would be final with you. And of course, the care, as well as the scheduling and the teams and so forth, is up to the Parks and Recreation Commission and the director, Nate Foley. So I just wanted to let you know that. I know Mike Hernandez is very active with Little League. And if you had any comments to that, Mike, we'd be happy to hear them at this point.
I've reached out to Nate Foley on Monday, I believe, and I just talked to him about some of our my concerns, and I shared with him what some of my friends and family and other people around town have been asking me to talk to him about the possibility of there being competitive sports and the uncertainty of like what other towns are doing for the COVID-19. And basically I just expressed to him that let's wait to see what the governor says and then we'll move forward from there. But
Yep.
At this time, I think we're just on a holding pattern right now.
Okay. Yep. that's pretty much what I also reiterated. So as these things evolve, if you hear of them first or the president of the Little League does, they should get in touch with my office, and in turn, I'll let the board know so that we can keep up to date on changes associated with the re-entry in light of COVID-19. So that's good. The other item that I want to talk about tonight is some information. First of all, we've had a lot of activity in town associated with the death of Mr. George Floyd in Minneapolis. There was a very modest, I would say, yesterday, a very peaceful protest that occurred. There were some difficulties that were encountered. However, our police department handled the situation very well, made sure that the folks who showed up for protesting were safe. In fact, made sure that traffic was stopped as needed. And I want to compliment the people that showed up as well as the police. I will let you know, in case you hadn't seen on social media, I had asked that people not, let me put it in a positive way. I had told people that it was very difficult in terms of safety on the Aragoni Bridge. And for large numbers of people, it presents a lot of difficulty. Most people listened to that and did not attend. The construction on that bridge, the narrowness of the lanes, the need to keep the lanes open for ambulances and other public safety matters is critical. And we're really enduring a very major project on that bridge, and it presents a lot of difficulties. So I had said to social media, and I said something to the selectmen, that I want to talk with you tonight about how we can make our statement about Portland and how the board feels about these things that have been happening in our country. I think it's important for us to make a statement. I worked with Selectman Pelton on a proclamation that I sent to the selectmen, and I'm going to read it while you review it. And I also know that we have some comments from the public. I have one in writing on my phone that I'll read after I read this proclamation, but I wanted to get this discussion started. After I read this, I also wanted your thoughts as to whether we should have some type of a public statement, a public way of presenting this. And I had thought this weekend would be something that we could, if we gather remotely or we gather in person, I think it is important to make a statement that we stand for equality, justice, anti-racism, anti-bigotry, anti-terrible things that have happened, and we need to make that statement. So why don't I start with the reading, and then we'll open it up for some discussion, and also I will read at least one statement that I have on my phone, actually, that came in tonight. A proclamation of solidarity. Whereas the Portland community stands strong against injustices wherever and whenever they may occur. And whereas there is no room for racism, bigotry, prejudice, or violence in our town, state, or nation. And whereas we stand for love and care of the Black community, people of color, and for all our neighbors. And whereas the death of our fellow citizen George Floyd in Minneapolis cannot be tolerated. And whereas Mr. Floyd's death affects all of us, and the suffering that his killing has created for his family and our nation is immense and widespread. And whereas we stand in solidarity against such horrific behavior and the underlying causes that drive it, it must never happen again. And whereas in Portland, our police fully support all peaceful protests and ensure the safety of all participants. Now therefore be it resolved that we encourage everyone to stand up against racism, bigotry, prejudice, and violence. And be it further resolved that we stand committed to peace, justice, and freedom for our citizens here in Portland and in solidarity with all Americans. And in witness whereof, we set our hand and cause the seal of Portland to be affixed this 3rd day of June in the year 2020. And it's signed by myself, as well as by Michael Hernandez, Louis Pear, Michael Pelton, Edward Shar, James Tripp, and Ralph Zampano. So I'll open it up. I think we'll start with Mike because Mike had thought there might be some suggested changes. So I'll change it. I'll turn it over to you, Mike.
All right, thank you. Just a couple thoughts and suggestions. I've been speaking with a number of folks today about what their suggestion was and what they felt. And there were a couple of things. One was they felt, as well as all of us, I believe we should be saying something strong and powerful to support our neighbors and letting them know we're in solidarity with them. In addition, I think it's very important for us as a town to do tangible, real, and consistent efforts going forward as well. So I think the thought that this is a first step, but an important first step, is something we need to be aware of, but I think we need to do tangible things going forward. I know there's a number of people on the call right now that are interested in putting their suggestions in and wanting to be heard in various ways. I think I'm going to leave it to some of them to articulate it better than I can. But I think the whole tangible, real effects, what kind of training are we doing with our town officials, the police, what can we do to learn more about what our citizens need as well? What are some things that we may not even be aware of? So we need to talk to those that we feel might be affected. So I'd like to after our fellow selectmen speak, I think getting them involved and giving their input would be even more helpful.
Thank you, Mike.
My pleasure.
Other comments from the selectmen?
Yeah, I'll talk next. What I would say is, I mean, I think it was a really good statement that was prepared, but I kind of agree with you, Mike. I think from my standpoint, it would cover what sticks in my mind that we want to say about giving support. But certainly I know there are other individuals in the community who I've either seen the emails or I've seen what they post on Facebook where they've expressed their opinion. I think they may be in a better situation to really reflect what they think should, what may be added to or may enhance what we may be preparing. So I think it would be helpful to have a pass with those individuals to see what they want. If there's anything that we've missed that we haven't covered in terms of trying to bring things out.
Susan, I'd like to read something I've written up for the Board of Selectmen, if you don't mind.
Sure. I'm sorry, could you say that again, Mike?
Yeah. All right, you can hear me? I'm sorry, I froze for a second.
That's better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's
froze.
better.
All right, can you hear me now? Is this okay?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, it froze. Okay. While the Board of Selectmen cannot make racism go away in the town of Portland, we are committed to working with all members of our community to work towards creating equality in our town. Racism and police brutality have unfortunately existed in our country for hundreds of years and will not be eradicated overnight. As a Board of Selectmen member, I am committed to creating ongoing dialogue and implementing long-term solutions to achieve our goal of equality in the town of Portland. I believe one of the first steps to achieving this is to create an environment where people who have experienced inequality feel comfortable sharing their experiences and reporting any concerns or issues they have to us so we can support them and help them correct these issues. It is my hope going forward to be able to provide our community members as a forum where concerns and solutions can be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mike, I think that was really good because it's like the next step of, so our statement kind of speaks to what we support, but you've like gone the next step of starting to talk about some actual actions at a very high level. So I think we don't want to lose that. We got to somehow utilize that with whatever feedback we get from the community. Is he still there?
Why don't I read what, at least one letter that I have in my email. And it is addressed to myself and members of the Board of Selectmen. I am reaching out to encourage and support a statement from the town to our Black residents during this stressful time. It is important that we recognize our Black residents in this moment. They need to hear from their local government right now. It won't be right or perfect, but reaching out specifically and personally to our residents who face disproportionate effects and are more at risk in our nation and our state is important. Even a small statement will go a long way. I would also like the town leadership to engage in anti-racism training. Many people are having their eyes opened right now, but there is more to learn and see. We should offer workshops to the community on anti-racism as a town. It is one thing to say that there is support for Black residents, and it is another to do the deep work of undoing white patriarchal culture and its mindsets. Our first responders and police force also need the opportunity for anti-racism training and should make themselves more available in the community to establish relationships with our Black and Latino residents. Creating events and opportunities for our police to build or create relationships with our minority residents should be prioritized and attendance should be expected. I ask that the town of Portland not send our police force to other towns or cities to police or harm protesters using their First Amendment rights. In regard to our schools, I spoke last night at the Board of Education meeting talking about the need for anti-racism work to happen for teachers and to be offered to parents. I highlighted several examples of seriously problematic curriculum assignments that I have encountered as a parent of elementary school children, along with some concrete suggestions to move forward. I ask all of you to do the deep work that is needed to combat racism and to truly keep our Black residents safe in a town that so many of us love and hope to keep safe for all. I would also like to see the town reevaluate and recommit to a robust diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. In its first year, it should focus solely on surveying and personally learning from our Black and other minority residents. I will continue to work with both the members of town boards and members of our community to continue to strive toward our goal of racial equity in our town. It is the time to act. Now is the time to act quickly while so many people are actively engaged in this cause. Inaction at this moment is unacceptable. And it's from Aaron Livensparger and Jeremy Stone of Middle Haddam Road. I want to see if I have any other messages. I have another one. And it's addressed to the full board and myself. I wanted to write to you today to show my support for my fellow community members and their efforts to address the issues of racial inequality we have seen in our country. I appreciate the town's efforts to work in conjunction with community members to express their emotions and concerns through a show of solidarity. As the wife of a Black man and mother of 3 Black boys, I fully support the efforts of the various groups in town trying to bring about change and racial equity in our town. I also know that proclamations and a show of solidarity alone do not bring about change to the lives of people of color in our community. To enact change, a long-term plan to first identify what the problems and concerns of minority members of our community are, must then be followed by a plan to rectify these issues. My personal experience over the last few years, working with First Selectwoman Bransfield, several members of the Board of Selectmen, members of our Park and Rec Commission, and members of the Housing Authority Board have always been very positive. I have found everyone to be supportive and willing to help in any capacity they can. I have no doubt this will continue, and I look forward to continuing to work with both the members of town boards and members of our community to continue to strive toward our goal of racial equity in our town. Now is the time to act quickly while so many people are actively engaged in this cause. Thank you, April Graves from Freestone Avenue. Michael, did you receive any other messages?
No, I received both of those you just read.
Okay. We also had a meeting on Monday to talk about some things, but I think the essence of that meeting, Mike, has been captured in those statements. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the only thing left is when it's time for the public to speak. I know a couple of them had some things they wanted to say and reiterate. So.
Okay. So in terms of, certainly a proclamation or a statement, I think they're important, but as I think has been eloquently pointed out by members of our board, as well as these statements, it certainly is only a very small beginning, and there's a lot of work that needs to occur. And I'm encouraged to hear that there are volunteers and there are people so committed to this effort. And I'll say that it isn't just tonight that I'm hearing from at least these two individuals and many other people in our town. They have been working on the issues of racial equity for a long time. And I think that this is an impetus to encourage more to become involved. And before we open it up to the public, I also want to give thanks to the Diversity Committee, which is not a committee of the town. It's a grassroots committee, and as such operates with its own agenda and its own ability to meet and to encourage racial equity and other areas of needed diversity. And those functions that they perform and have performed under the leadership of Caroline Murray have been excellent. I am a member of that group, and many other people are as well. In light of COVID-19, they've had difficulty in meeting. They had planned to meet on Juneteenth, and I did take time to pull out the proclamation that we wrote last year and shared that with the selectmen, and my office will issue that proclamation as well. I'm not going to read it. It will take too much time, and I don't want to keep our listeners and viewers from their time to speak. But this proclamation will also be on record, and we'll put it on our website. I'll just point out that Juneteenth is Independence Day or Freedom Day. It combines the words June and 19th and commemorates the June 19, 1865 announcement of abolition of slavery throughout the United States and the Confederate States of America. It's been celebrated by the African American community for over 150 years, and it's celebrated on June 19. So with that, I'll open it up to Kevin to help us with the information.
Absolutely. First up, we have Erin Lippensparger, who'd like to add to her previous letter. And just to all the folks who are, if you can pretend when you start, state your name and address, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Erin,
Hi, this is Erin. Can you all hear me? My sound is funny sometimes.
Loud and clear.
Yes.
Hey. Thank you. Thank you. My name's Erin Livensparger. My husband, Jeremy Stone, is with me as well. And my parents, Nancy and Bruce Livensparger, live with us and support our letter as well. We live at 247 Middle Haddam Road. Susan, thank you. I didn't expect you to read it. Thank you for reading my statement, our
You're
statement.
welcome.
You got it. You got through it way better than I just wanted to thank you and just I'm really raw, as many of us are right now, hearing about Black people close to me, and what they're going through, and just this time is really hard. And I'm just really super grateful that you're taking my husband, my family's words seriously. Can't stress enough that this is a matter of life and death for so many people. And I look forward, as you said, looking for volunteers. Here I am. I look forward to working with you all and supporting the town in anti-racist training at all levels. This is about our Black friends, folks in our community's lives. And as I shared at the Board of Ed last night, it's made its way into my children's homework and our conversations. My daughter didn't sleep last night because she was afraid. And it's about all of our children having a better future. So I just thank you. I wanted to stay on to tell you how moved I was that you read our words. Black Lives Matter, and I really thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Erin. All right, we have Laurel Steinhauser. Let's get you unmuted. All right, can we hear you, Laurel?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yes.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Laurel Steinhauser. I live at 56 Prospect Street. I'm a member of the Board of Education as well as the Library Board of Directors. This evening, I'm here to acknowledge that we all, as white folks who are in leadership positions in Portland, need to own our responsibility in making sure that our town is continually working against the racism and bias, which is so firmly entrenched in our American way of life, and towards a safer and more equitable future for our Black and brown neighbors and friends who make Portland home. In the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, we've heard elected leaders at all levels of government say not again, not one more, but the reality is that there will be continued violence against Black bodies, and there will continue to be police brutality, and it likely won't be long before we read about another Black man, somebody's son, brother, husband, father, who's been murdered by the police. These niceties do nothing to make the people of color in our community safer. I'm grateful to you all on the Board of Selectmen for your proclamation of solidarity, especially you, Susan, thank you. To our chair on the Board of Ed for the statement she's put together, and to our library for stating on social media that Black Lives Matter. Our hearts are in the right place. So I want to ask you all what comes next, what actions will we commit to work toward a more equitable Portland. The Portland Board of Education has begun what I hope will be an ongoing conversation about making our schools a more equitable and inclusive place for our children. It is my hope that we will take a hard look at how racism is affecting our students' experience every day in our classrooms and hallways, and make a plan to work toward a change in culture, inclusive of the board itself, our administration, our teachers and staff, our curriculum, and of course, our student body. I'm asking you all on the Board of Selectmen tonight and moving forward to begin a conversation about what you can do to make Black and brown folks in Portland safer. How will you make sure that you are creating an environment which is welcoming of diverse voices? Will you hold community conversations to talk about how people of color in Portland perceive town government and law enforcement? Will you pursue anti-racism training for town leadership? Will you work toward building a positive relationship between law enforcement and people of color in town? Will that include ongoing anti-bias training for our police officers? Will you go back to your town committees and participate in conversations about how we elevate Black and brown voices and recruit more folks of color to run for office and serve on our town boards and commissions, because representation matters. I hope we can commit ourselves to working together to identify and follow through on some concrete steps. Our community will surely be better, safer, and stronger for it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laurel.
Thank you, Laurel. And next up, we have Lauren Christensen. Lauren.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Hi. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak, everyone. And I want to thank you very much, Susan and the rest of the Board of Selectmen, for making a statement in support of our Black and Brown community members, and also Susan specifically for being so supportive of yesterday's protest, as well as for helping to organize a protest in 2 weeks. I think it's so important that we have the ability to protest in public. It truly protects our amendment rights, and it gives voices to people that otherwise may not have them. I want to acknowledge also Mike Pelton and Mike Hernandez. Thank you so much for your touching words. I'm really moved at how hard it sounds like both of you are willing to work, and I'm completely assured that the rest of the Board of Selectmen feels the same. I want to note that because of recent events with the murder of George Floyd, equity is at the forefront of our minds and racism is at the front of our conversation. But I think we also need to acknowledge that this is a lived experience every day of people also within our own community. My personal interactions with the police in our town have been nothing but completely positive. I have found them to be unbelievably professional whenever I've had to give them a call or whenever I've encountered them in the community. I'm very grateful for their peaceful presence at our schools in the mornings at drop off. And I do want to say thank you to our police. To me, this is not just about police brutality. This is about systemic racism in our society. And as white folks who are holding leadership positions in our town, we need to be extremely mindful of how our voices are used and to help people that may not otherwise have a voice. I am curious about our police, if they do undergo any bias training. If they do not, can we please consider implicit bias training for them? And I'm also wondering if the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education, as well as potentially all of our town employees, would be willing to undergo implicit bias training as the very start of anti-racist work. As others have said, the statement that is being read tonight needs to lead to action. Please consider taking even more steps towards equity is really the word, equity and justice. And I guess I would just like to leave it with, how can we reach out to those that may not have previously had a voice? So if people are afraid to come forward and talk about their experiences, how can we create a place that is safe of judgment for them so that they feel listened to and heard, and so that we can get their true experiences? And thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. I have one, going to test my reading skills. Okay. Everyone can hear me okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay, perfect. So this is from Elizabeth Habino, 19 Scenic Drive. She had to put her kids to bed, so she's unable to speak herself. She says, "Dear Board of Selectmen and Susan, in case I am unable to speak tonight, I'm emailing my comments. I appreciate the town addressing the issue of racism and protests occurring in our nation. In making a statement to our town, I would like the board to acknowledge the big picture of how racism, from systemic to individual acts, has always existed in our nation and will continue to exist. It will take decades and even centuries to confront our nation's history regarding what white Americans have done to blacks and all of the small and large decisions that have been made to bring us to where we are today. Racism is part of our collective consciousness as a nation. It is not just a horrific act."
I'm done. I did a great job.
Oh, thank you. George Floyd's death was just one part of this. I would like the BOS to take a strong stance against the killing of black people by the police, but the fact is that it's going to take much more statements by local governments to make the positive change that we all want to see. I hear the passion from our elected officials in condemning this act of violence, and I want to hear the town owning our part in this battle. The leadership in our town is overwhelmingly white, so we need to own that. In a statement, I would love to see something included regarding that Portland has a commitment to working together with all our residents to address racism that happens here in our town, and that we welcome all residents to voice their concerns to come together to create positive changes in our town. I would like to see our town engage in meaningful dialogue and workshops which center people of color if they would like to be involved. We have much work to do, and it can happen in many forms and places: our schools, libraries, professional development across town offices, and elsewhere. As far as I know, our police department is supported and respected here in town, and I have certainly not heard any negativity in that regard. However, my interactions with police are as a white person, and I do not know how people of color in town view our PD. I'm curious to know whether Portland Police has received anti-bias training. If so, that is wonderful, and will that training be ongoing? I would love to hear a statement from our police department dedicated to fostering positive relationships with all members of our town, and would be even better if the PD can participate in community workshops around racism. Those are a few of my thoughts, and I look forward to continuing to engage in this dialogue. And again, that is Elizabeth Habino from 19 Scenic Drive. Thank you. And at this time, that concludes public comment.
Thank you, Kevin. Elizabeth had sent the email. I think she may have sent it to all of us, so that's helpful. Thank you, Liz. And I would suggest.
Kitch has her hand up. I'm sorry. I missed
I'm
that.
sorry. Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Hold on. Kitch, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Susan, good evening. I'm glad to hear that you're all concerned about what's happening in our world right now. I'm wondering if either CCM or COST has decided to do training programs for elected officials.
I have not heard as of yet. I know that they did address the ongoing national issue, Kitch. So I suspect that they probably will make some training available. I think that's an excellent suggestion by you, and I will look into that in terms of availability. That's a great suggestion.
And then my other inquiry has to do with the next This Is Us Portland. Perhaps that would be an opportunity to share feelings, ideas, and some solutions as we move forward.
Sounds excellent.
Okay, thank you, Kitch. Now I think I got everybody. Okay.
Is there anybody else, Kevin, or are we? Okay. I would suggest that perhaps we do add something to our proclamation. Under the first, now therefore be it resolved, we encourage everyone to stand up against racism, bigotry, prejudice, and we commit to working together with all our residents to address racism that happens here in our town, and we welcome all residents to voice concerns and come together to create positive changes in our town. So I would suggest that addition. And with that, is there a motion to approve the proclamation?
Susan,
Lou.
if I might, I agree with what you just said, and I think it does blend both Mike and Mike's thoughts, and I think that that's a good thing. Mike Hernandez, how do you feel about that change? Do you think that blends your ideas as well as Mike Belton's, or are there other things that you think should be included?
No, I'm satisfied with the change. If we were to vote on it like right now, I would approve of it, yes.
Okay. So see what I'm seeing, and I think this is a great dialogue. And a lot of people came on and spoke from their hearts, and I think that's what we really need to do at this time. But more so, what's the actions that we're going to and I think that's the piece that Mike Hernandez had mentioned, is that we're talking about a proclamation to support our stance, but also the next steps after that. And I think Kitch had a good idea about training and things like that. It just seems like we need to do more of this, and maybe this should be a continued piece on our agenda so that we don't lose track of it as we move forward with our other agendas. I think that this is a first good step. Luckily, we do have a great diversity committee in town. And I think part of the awareness that we've seen so far is because of the diversity committee in Portland. So even though we aren't there yet with all the things we need to do, a lot of things have come forward that has made this community a more diverse and a community that feels that it's important for every citizen, no matter what color, race, or religion, or nationality that they are, is that they are a value. So with that said, I would make a motion to approve that proclamation.
Thank you, Lou. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Oh. Excuse me, Jim.
Who said that?
Rick and I were both into it, so Rick, your pleasure, sir.
I think Jim and I were both seconding it at the same time.
Yeah.
But I was also gonna throw out there, Susan, that might we consider having the diversity committee become more of an official town committee and you know, have a regular meeting schedule? I don't know if we could somehow expand that committee or get more public awareness to them.
Sure.
To kind of keep the ball rolling, so to speak. I think that is a good committee.
Yep. We can certainly, I can put that on a future agenda so that we can address that. Certainly we can do that. When they formed the committee, it seemed, at least at the beginning stages, that it was more helpful to them to not be subject to all of the rules about agendas and minutes and things of that nature. But I think that was because they were getting up and running, and sometimes it's difficult for grassroots groups to be able to get all of the paperwork associated with a town commissioner board. But maybe moving forward, we can give them some support in terms of a recording secretary and some other help, and we can discuss appointing them as a committee of the Board of Selectmen and give them that support that they need. So that's a good suggestion. And I will put the item on our agenda going forward. I don't know whether you want to call it a, how would you like it to be listed on the agenda? Solidarity, diversity, anti-racism.
I guess if you're asking me, I'd have to think about that a little. I don't have any, I guess, I'm familiar with the diversity group, so that terminology, but it certainly doesn't have to be. Maybe somebody else wants to weigh in on that. I'm not opposed, I guess, to keeping the name the same, but go ahead.
One of the things I was thinking of, and it was one of the suggestions that people had said tonight, is that racial equity and diversity.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll use that. Thank you.
I like that, Lou.
Well, adding to that, I know in Erin's note, she had talked about a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. So I don't know, inclusion may be important to them as well. So I don't know if those three terms really should be part of that definition.
How about racial equity, diversity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there was a motion on the floor and it was seconded with discussion, further discussion.
I just wanted to say, you know, it's in the events, right? What's happened and unfolded. There's always been there has been a lot of conversations that you get part of, especially with folks that that I talk with a lot. about these issues. And I think what's a lot of this discussions that's happened in the last week, the events of the last week, have really just, I think, raised the level of awareness. I'm proud to support this amendment, this proclamation. You know, given that it talks about not only what we need to do in terms of moving forward, it also talks about some concrete actions. I just want to take a second. I want to say thank you, Susan, and thanks Mike Pelton, and thanks Mike Hernandez, and really everybody who's worked on this. Erin, and the conversations that we had at the Board of Education last night. You know, the key is that as we really examine the inequities that exist, I think there's a need for this. So thank you.
We're just commenting that it's pouring rain out right now, so everybody's windows better be down or up in their cars. At least downtown here, it's pouring.
It's pouring on Middle Haddam Road too.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. The last question that I had for you had to do with whether or not you wanted any events this weekend or whether you don't at this point. I know that some of the social media has indicated an interest in the June 19. Some people were concerned with waiting that long. I did speak with our public health director, and Russell Nelmed said, remember that any event that happens, it's important that you follow the social distancing, wearing of masks, and following good hygiene. So whatever is to occur, that's important to put forward.
Susan, is there enough, would there be enough time to organize something? You know, you only have Thursday, Friday. Might it be better to go a week later, or it's at least to get more time to organize it and maybe more people can participate?
Yes, I think we have some people that commented tonight. We certainly have selectmen that I feel are interested. And if we could get together and plan something, I think that might be helpful. I don't want to ever have people think that we're the only ones that can plan this. I think what I'm hearing from the community is how important it is to be inclusive and to have Black people, people of color, other neighbors be part of the planning and be part of the work that we're doing. It's not something that only one or two people can be involved with, and that necessity of inclusion is where I think you really begin to have some change that can occur. So I will work hard on that. I've been contacted by other people that have pledged that they want to work. So I think working together, we can certainly put something together that would be respectful and very profound and effective and visible. Our police have also indicated to me that whatever they can do to assist in making sure that people are safe and encourage them to be involved, whether it's closing a street or making sure that safe travel is given, they are pledging to help with that as well, as we stated in our proclamation. So we won't do anything this weekend because of the shortness of planning. I just wanted to leave that open, hearing the interest by many of our residents for making statements. So we'll continue with the planning. Is that the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, I think that's good, Susan. I think that you need some planning. I mean, we had a wonderful Memorial Day service where we had not a lot of people gathering, but it was on Zoom, and there was a lot of planning that went into that to make sure that that went off well. And I think to make it meaningful, it would have to be planned well so that it would be fair to everybody to be able to say exactly.
Sounds good, Lou, and I agree. The Memorial Day service was done very well, and it certainly was a very touching ceremony, and I think goes to the heart of what we in Portland try to do, and that is to make sure that what we do is quality, includes many people and is done correctly. So I will work on that process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Going back to our agenda. I think we covered public comment, unless there's any more public comment, Kevin? Not at this point.
At this time.
On the agenda is the proclamation for Juneteenth, and this is something that was written from last year. It's a initiation of this proclamation. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Motion made by Rick, seconded by Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Motion carries. The next, number 8, contract award, the salt storage facility improvements, which is a small town economic assistance program grant. And I think at this point, I'll ask Bob Shea for some comment and introduction. Bob?
Hi, good evening, everybody. So here we are, looking for to get a project that is, well, it's been a 2-year project for me since the day I started, but I'm sure, we've talked about this and some members of this board for probably over 10 or 12 years. So we're at the stage where we had a very successful bid on what we feel are very good improvements to protect our aquifer and to stay in the current location that we are, which is economically much better for our town, as well as taking advantage of money that's been granted to us by the state to do some of this work. We had 10 bidders, and we have successfully found one that works very closely with our budget. Susan has some resolutions related to a lot of work that's been done, especially by Tom, to look at ways to move forward with this project. We were, as you know, and you've granted some money to move forward to do that. In previous meetings, we were a little short. And when I say a little, I'm very comfortable with my estimates because we were only a few $1,000s off when you look at the whole scheme. So with that said, we studied what our reserves could be in our current public works capital. And we did find some funding to help offset this. That is funding that was either both left over from a project, a successful project for the building, and funding that was put aside for the possibility of adding a storage shed door to the facility, which was not approved by DEEP and not part of no longer a viable plan. So that left us some available money to make this program work. And Susan has for you a transfer of funds authorization to make that happen so that we could move forward and award, with the stipulation that we first need to have the final approval by DEEP, which we hope to expect by the end of the week. Things look favorable. I hope that that will continue. It made the design that we've worked hard to produce at that location has been approved by the body at DEEP, including the aquifer specialists, as well as our stormwater specialists. And now it got moved above because we're in this situation where we need to do something, and it's in the director's hands of management. We hope to hear something, I hope by Friday, if not early next week. So things are good. I'm very lucky to be able to be working with a group from the state that seems to be happy with our design and my thoughts on what we can do there to not only utilize the wonderful spot that we have there, which is good for our usage as far as the availability being close to our highway garage, the accessibility during winter storms, as well as, and just as important, if not more, protecting the aquifer in that area that we use, because our well is not that far from there. So that's all I have, unless you have some comments, but I am extremely happy. The bids that were received were very large separation, being concerned as we were going through them, but we did get to the number finally that we needed to do. So.
Thank you. I did get a message from Mike Hernandez. He lost power at his house, so his internet is no longer working, and he'll try to get back on as soon as he can. There is, as I said earlier, a storm in the area, so I think his power has been interrupted. I'm going to read the resolution, and after I finish, there may be some questions from the selectmen. Whereas the Public Works is making needed improvements to the salt storage shed and is using Small Town Economic Assistance Program grant and $50,000 from that supplemental appropriation we passed on April 15, 2020. And whereas in order to award the low bid, which was opened on June 2nd, 2020, additional funds are required. And now I'm going to explain from where they come. Whereas $10,000 was previously funded in Public Works Capital, Building Maintenance, which is the name of the line item in the capital fund, for an alternate door at the salt shed, which is not needed and we're not going to be putting in. And whereas $3,830 remains in the previously funded Public Works Capital Building Maintenance for the completed roof project at the salt shed, so we didn't need that residual amount of $3,830. And whereas Public Works is requesting the total of $13,830 be moved within line item number 0814100089090 to the project entitled Salt Shed Facility Improvements. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Selectmen of the Town of Portland hereby approves the transfer of the $13,830 to the Public Works Highway Department for the project Salt Shed Facility Improvements from the Public Works Building Maintenance Storage Shed Door in the amount of $10,000, as I said earlier, and roof at Salt Shed in the amount of $3,830 that I mentioned earlier, that are both within the account that's numbered 0814100089090. So I'll ask if there are any questions on this. And I'll also add that we are looking forward to having these improvements made. I will say that Bob Shea has worked very well and very long and hard with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, also with the Department of Public Health, and also with the Department of Economic and Community Development in making certain that the improvements that are going to be made at this salt shed are in keeping with good environmental science, protection of a level A aquifer, and also provide a working structure for us to store salt that's so necessary to take care of our roads and sidewalks in the wintertime. So thank you, Bob, and thank you to all of the state departments, as well as previous staff that worked on this and our consulting engineers.
So I'll make the motion that you just read.
Thank you, Ralph. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Lou Pear. Discussion? Jim, did you have anything?
Yeah, I wanted to say to Bob, this has been a recurring reporting item that we've discussed in the Water and Sewer BOS subcommittee because of its importance to get it done. So just thank you to all the for all the hard work and getting it done, and congratulations on coming up with a viable plan. It really, of all the different locations that were considered, keeping it where it is, centralized in town, is really best for an operations, and making it safe with the aquifer. That's just well done. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Rick Shar?
So I've just, what's the actual bid, or what's it going to cost us totally?
That is going to be discussed on the next agenda. The actual bid, excuse me, it's part of this agenda. Excuse me,
Okay.
Rick.
Bless you.
But the total contract amount, thank you, $204,200.
Okay.
Excuse me, I have an alert coming through.
storm. Power.
A severe thunderstorm warning has been issued for your area. Please take protective measures now. Press 1 to confirm receipt. Press 2 to replay this message. Thank you.
So everybody be aware there is a thunderstorm, a severe thunderstorm in our area. I'm sorry for the interruption, Rick.
Okay, so that's fine. And I'll just echo what Jim said. You know, I'm glad to see that we're going to be able to keep it there and protect the aquifer. So well done, Bob.
Thank you. I mean, we're still waiting for DEP's final approval, but I'm hoping that will be able to move forward. I'm not sure, you know, in the future we might have to do a little more, but this is the base of, this is the real critical part to secure the building, to basically seal it from the environment, to protect that area around it and do some drainage and much needed repairs to the area. So.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? There being none, all in favor of the motion?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. And the next resolution that I did send to you, and the reason these came to you today is because the bids were opened yesterday, and we had to make certain that the dollars were available to award the bid. Resolved that the Board of Selectmen hereby authorizes First Selectwoman Susan S. Bransfield to execute and deliver the name of and on behalf of the Town of Portland a contract with Hubert E. Butler Construction Company, LLC, of 984 Portland Cobalt Road, Portland, Connecticut, 06480, for the purpose of bid number 2020-09, Salt Storage Facility Improvements Project. Total contract amount prior to any required change orders is approximately $204,200, pending the approval and review of the town engineer and Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Is there a motion to approve said resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Oh,
Motion made by Jim.
Jim can take it.
Is there a second? Ralph, second.
Yeah, that's fine. Whichever, either Rick or I, either one.
I will point out that is, you are awarding the contract. Certainly there's other dollars involved with this project in the engineering, plan, design, and other actions that needed to be taken to get to this point. It's been a very long time in coming. And again, I want to compliment our Public Works Department Director, Bob Shea, for making sure that this will get done and will improve our environment. I'll call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you all.
Oh, you're welcome. Since we're not going to be dealing with the water pollution control pump and settling tank, you will have that on a future agenda, but we're not prepared for the full analysis of that bid. That bid also came in, will be coming in, or came in? It came in, right, Bob?
Yep, they were all received. Correct.
Good. But we'll be bringing that to you probably in July. There's a 60-day hold on that bid, so we'll be bringing that to you at that time. The next item is really for a simply discussion. Now that the budget season is over and we'll be embarking in the new year come July 1, I wanted to put on our agenda water infrastructure. And since I have Bob Shea here, I wanted him to just comment a little bit on a mini report on the water system. And then maybe Jim would have some comments as the chairman of the Water Sewer Subcommittee. Bob?
Well, I think we have a lot more work to do. We've done an awful lot of work with the subcommittee as well as the commission, working together to not only find what direction that we need to go, worked very closely on a rate structure and changes to kind of catch up and get us where we need to be, which seems to be a battle, you know, chasing that cart down the road. We just don't want to be passed by it. We're trying to keep up with rates, and water is becoming expensive. Not only that, you know, regulation is changing each and every day, which is very costly. We are trying to maintain our system as best we can with the funds that we have, with, as the board is very conscious of the rate payers and what their ability is to pay for our current usage. So, with that said, I've been struggling for 2 years, with our infrastructure, and it's something that hasn't gone away. It's something that many boards, including yours, is going to continue to struggle with, and how to not only, fund that budget, but make some really important infrastructure changes. We are needling away at that, but we have some big work to do, and we continue to have some really aggressive failures in one area of town that I'm looking really to work with the commission as well as the subcommittee on trying to find some funding agents that we are able to correct those problems. That's in our industrial area, and unfortunately when we lose water there, it's usually a very large break. We had another one over the holiday weekend. They seem to all come on holidays. We have one on Christmas Eve. So it's very difficult for your crews who are coming out away from their families for normal breaks, but over holidays it's difficult. In the middle of the winters even more so. And the breaks in those areas are, they impact an awful lot of residents until we can get the water shut off in that area. And then those that are affected between it, of course, are without water. So we try not to have that happen, but it happens. It happens often. 2 years, 17 breaks under my belt already, which is a huge number. But we're able to manage those with a really good crew, and able to get those guys in to do that. But we need to make some of those changes. So I think moving forward, Susan, we're going to work and continue our work with the committees to come up with some resolution to make some of those repairs, which are really detrimental to our water supply to our residents.
Thank you, Bob. Jim?
Yeah, I'll echo. We have these conversations in the subcommittee meetings. It is a challenge because when we look at the infrastructure and how we manage it, the water infrastructure and those upgrades, they do get borne by the 2,300 ratepayers that are on the water system. For the sewer system, it's the 1,527 sewer users that end up having to fund those upgrades. So we try to be very sensitive to the rates and try to manage that. I do think it's why we have to continue some of the discussions that we're having going forward. For example, on the water side, we really need to continue to look at how we change that cost structure. We've been looking very hard at what we can do in terms of finding an alternate water source. Right now, our primary water source, the rates have been going up double digits now for the last 3 years. It's not really a long-term sustainable model. So we need to continue those discussions and actually keep some of those moving forward. I do know that we are planning, I've already had conversations with the other members of the subcommittee in terms of trying to plan the next meeting. We are looking towards the end of next week. We're just trying to, it seems a little minefield of individual schedules, so we're going to work that out, but we'll be looking to do that. And Bob, I'm going to touch base with you as well to make sure with everything you have going on that you're able to attend as well, so we can have those discussions going forward.
Sounds good. Thank you very much. The next item is Eversource proposal for low emitting diode LED lights at the Portland Library. And I bring this to your attention. It will come back on a future agenda as well, but I like to bring things to you ahead of time so that you can review them and think about them before you have to vote. This is a very, I think, important for our energy reduction usage. To put in all LED lights at the library should save us a good amount of money going forward and save a lot of energy. The proposal, Michelle scanned it in and you can review it when you have time. She sent it to you today. What I'm bringing to you is the fact that in order to pay for this, it's a 0% loan that goes over the course of, I believe, 4 years. And it would enable us to pay it, if I'm not mistaken, and Bob, correct me, I believe it's with the savings that you realize from the installation. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
And it will require, because it's a multi-year agreement, it would require under our charter a special town meeting. And as these things come forward for us, there's this project, and then there's another project for the leasing of copiers for our schools, which only we sign contracts, multi-year contracts. The school does not do that. Has to be from the municipality because we are the fiscal agent. We consulted our attorney who handles all of our bond matters for the multi-year lease of the copiers. And he said, while you cannot have an in-person voting, he suggests for these types of endeavors, if you wish to move forward with them, if you believe they're in keeping with 7S executive order by the governor, which is without doing it, you would have difficulty running your town, or you would have difficulty with finances, or whatever the reason might be, you can proceed to have these actions occur with only you, the legislative body, voting on them. But what he asked us to do is to put forward within the newspaper the notification that a special town meeting by Zoom would be held. And what he's indicating is it would allow publicity for the action and also some discussion, but there is no vote. People cannot vote on that. And his reading of the executive order would allow us to do that. So I'll just open that up for your discussion in terms of whether you want to move forward with these kinds of actions. They're not like a special appropriation that we did several weeks ago, where it was frontline vehicles and school security and HVAC that needed to be done. There were police vehicles, there was a fire equipment, etc. Those were things that really we felt were critical and needed to proceed without an in-person vote. So I wanted to open it up to you and see your thinking about whether you want to proceed without an in-person vote, notification certainly of the public, but moving forward with those two items, which are the lighting at the library and the leasing of the copiers.
So Susan, my thoughts are that, you know, when we have these meetings, typically there's maybe 2 or 3 people from the public that do attend and talk about it, but it still puts it out there so that we're giving them an opportunity to speak. I mean, we know what we went through in just doing this budget and having to just vote for it without, you know, having anyone else vote. I know that even though we look at this LED lighting and it makes total sense, there's going to be a question of you're spending money, and we just talked about a tight budget. Even though when they get the explanation, they're going to understand that it makes sense and it's not an issue of us not accounting for the funds. So for me, from that standpoint, I don't think there's anything lost if we have a simple hearing, you know, right before we would have the regular board meeting to actually do the vote on them. You know, I think we've done that with other things, and it just gives people an opportunity to reach out. The copier one will be more benign, but this one I would guess would trigger some sort of confusion about, they said there's no money and now they're paying money to do LED projects in the library. So I don't know. To me, it might make more sense to just give them an opportunity for them to speak on it.
Susan, if I might,
Lou?
I think that moving forward on this proposal is a good idea. I think that allowing the public to have a public hearing gives us a feeling of where they stand and what their plans are and what they think about energy efficiency as well as copiers for the schools. I think that one of the things that this is going to do is it's not going to really cost more, maybe initially, but it's really going to probably save a lot of money down the road. When you look at that proposal, it looks like $10,000 is going to come to us off the $42,000, It's going to cost $32,000. And that's a 3-year or 4-year contract of zero interest. We're talking, $7,000 or $8,000 a year. I'm guessing that $3,000 or $4,000 will be saved each year. So once you get past year 6 or 7 or 8, you're saving the tax dollars for all our residents, $3,000 or $4,000 a year in electricity just for those lamps and lights in that facility. So long range, it saves money. Up front, it might be a cost, but if we can save money and show that we are a sustainable community, we're doing good work.
And
Thank
Lou,
you, Lou.
that's 3.6 years for payback. 3.6 years.
Susan,
Yes.
it's Rick. I've done many, like probably a dozen of these programs with the power company, with my businesses, and every one I've done, I printed this one off, and they don't have a page here, but you should be able to get a page from the contractor. Usually you end up paying back, and they'll show it in a pro forma, where you're actually paying back the loan with savings on the electricity, because the new lamps are so efficient that you're actually using less electricity to power these new LED lamps. So they're oftentimes, the programs I've done, there's a savings right from the beginning, and then the savings expands after you finish paying off the 0% loan. So if this program is similar, I believe it's similar to the ones, and I have one that right now that I'm still paying off for outdoor lighting. And these are like great programs. I wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't cost the town anything, even from the beginning. But if it does cost us a little bit, we will more than get it back.
Right.
And as far as having the public weigh in, I'm fine with that. I mean, I think that's democracy at work and all, but we can definitely show to the residents that this is going to be a savings to the town. These are just great programs.
Yeah.
Can't say enough.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rick. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
No, we took advantage of, the time with the library renovation to go in and do a good thorough study, because we were able to, and it's hard to do that when buildings are operating. And it's less intrusive. The light fixtures are adapted to the ones that are there, so there's no work to the ceiling. It's a great program, and there's really no outlay. It's a no outlay program, and you're right, Rick, that's how you pay for it, with instant savings. There's over 130 bulbs in that facility that we change bulbs almost every day. And the age of the facility, that's the frosting on the cake for the renovations, to try to move forward towards the future and start saving some money and energy.
Yeah, I feel the same way when I look at this. We did something similar to this with the schools, a few years ago. The savings are significant. I'm reading the paragraph here that talks about $9,000 savings annually, 28% return on investment. As Ralph indicated a few minutes ago, 3.6 year payback, across the board. It's in accordance with our sustainable CT goals. I just think it's a great idea. Make sure we have a public hearing on it, because we definitely want the public to understand exactly what the actions are that would be taken. But these are the types of things I think it's good to proceed on.
Thank you. So I'll put them on a future agenda for your formal vote, both items, and we can always have further discussion at that time. Thank you. That was helpful to us.
I had a question, Susan.
Certainly.
On that proposal, is there a time limit that we have to approve on that?
Yes, it's actually the end of this month, but I'm going to call, or I'm going to have ask Bob if he could please call and see if we can get an extension on that, Lou.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah, it's a good point. They usually roll, oftentimes they'll extend the date if you ask them.
Yeah,
Um,
it
Yeah,
wouldn't be.
No, it looked like there was a 2021 date in terms of like the overall program dollars. But obviously the specific proposal has its end date. We'd have to get that extended.
Right. That is a good point. Thank you. The next item is an annual action, which is to adopt the non-union administration pay plan for 2020, 2021. And I believe you received that electronically. The one thing you'll note under the Parks and Recreation Youth Services and the Town Tech Summer, to incorporate the rising of the minimum wage, there would be a change in the wages effective September 1. So that's why there's 2 columns on the page. It's to include the minimum wage increases per the state law. Are there any questions on this pay plan?
Looks good.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Thank you, Lou. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Jim Tripp. Discussion? All in favor?
Oh, I was just going to ask
Go
one
ahead, Rick.
question, Susan.
Sure.
Are these in keeping with numbers that we used in our budgeting for
Yes.
salaries for the various departments? Well, the budget we just completed?
Yes, these would be in keeping with the budget that was passed. Just because there's a maximum on some of these ranges, that doesn't mean the individuals receive the maximum. That's a range that allows us some flexibility, but
Yeah.
not everyone makes the top of the scale.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. With that, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Are you okay with that vote, Mike? You were frozen for just a second there.
I was unmuting myself. Yes, I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you very much. The next item is adoption of other budgets, which include the Animal Control Fund, the Town Aid Road Fund, the Youth Services Fund, the Resource Recovery Fund, the Building Maintenance Fund, and the Parks and Recreation Fund. And just as a reminder, the reason we do these separate from the general fund is because they can't be approved until the general fund is approved, which contains the transfer from general taxation to these funds in order for them to operate. So that's why you adopt them separate from the general fund adoption. Are there any questions on these funds? They were discussed during the budget season, and as I said, you did approve the transfer to these funds under the general fund passage that you had recently.
I'll make a motion to adopt the other budgets.
Thank you, Lou. Motion made by Lou. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Rick Shar. Further discussion, questions? There being none, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you. The next item, again, is more informative. We talked about this during our budget season, and that's the sale of 634 Main Street, which is the former, they called it the Cellar Savers Museum. Some people know it as the place where the train at Christmas time was displayed. And we talked about selling this building. And I needed to put this on the agenda to ask if you would like us, the town, to proceed to do some investigation for the sale of that building.
Susan, is that the building that we talked about on the budget final
Correct.
budget night?
Yes.
Okay, so it's up by Indian Hill Avenue.
Yes.
In Gildersleeve, yeah, okay.
In the Gildersleeve section, yeah. Right
Right.
now, Rick, there's some storage. Public Works does use that for storage, but the building is not being used for any activity. It's in a residential area, but there is commercial allowed in that area, if I'm not mistaken. The package store is nearby, Gildersleeve's package store is
Right.
there, and then the rug and carpeting and flooring company is there. And then around the corner, of course, is a
Marina.
couple of other, yep, Petzol's is
Yeah.
there, and some small commercial operations. So we would need to look at the value of the building. We need to look at the zoning, and then we can bring back to you what information we have. But in our efforts to look at reducing overhead, I think it's important that budget's been passed, we don't stop. We make sure that we implement these cost-saving measures going forward, and that's why I put it on the agenda. That's also why we put on the LED lighting and why we're going to talk about some other clean energy initiatives. We're trying to do our best here.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with us proceeding and getting that process started to explore the sale. It's consistent with the discussion that we had and how we, passed our budgets. So it makes sense to me.
Thank you, Rick.
yeah, I agree with Jim.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
I agree as well.
Thank you, Ralph. Lou, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. And I think this was part of all of the different things of overhead, like you mentioned during budget. I think if we can find a way of reducing our costs in different ways without increasing taxes is a good idea.
Good point. Mike, any comments?
No, I agree. I agree. We need to look every place we can.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I will proceed. The next item is Shared Clean Energy Facility, RFP, which is an initiative that actually Lou Pear, who was on a call with me, along with Tom Robinson and Bob Shea, and members of our Clean Energy Task Force. Lou, maybe you want to talk a little bit about this.
Well, this is the way of saving money and also being energy efficient. We have a piece of property that is a landfill that's now covered, and it could be generating dollars for the community in ways of leasing property and also tax revenue based on the value of the photovoltaic system, the solar farm. So in doing so, if in fact we can earn income because of lease and of taxes, the generation of that money would then go to the general fund. It would help taxes as well. It would provide a community that is looking to be a sustainable community, energy efficient, and it would generate electricity for the grid. The way I understand it, it would go to the grid and it would provide electricity for people either in town or nearby. Because the transmission, you don't want the transmission to go too far because then you lose some of it in the wires. But I think it's a benefit to have something like that. You see these periodically in different parts of the state where there are different, for example, if you took a look at the top of the trash to enter, actually it's a trash landfill in Hartford, there's a solar farm on top of that. And so there are plenty of other places within the state. I think Stafford Springs has one as well. So these are becoming very popular mini power plants for Eversource or United Illuminating or who is the power company. In doing so, they do not have to build billion-dollar power plants. And at the same time, we can generate electricity for these different companies and also benefit by leasing and receiving taxes on the solar array.
Thank you.
So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you.
It sounds like
So-
the definition of a win-win, right? So,
We hope so, yep. I need to speak with our town attorney about this, and I'll be getting back to you, and certainly I'll be working with Lou on this and the Clean Energy Task Force members, as well as our town staff. So thank you. The next item is appointments to boards and commissions. I don't have any from my office. Any from the board? Not tonight?
Don't have any.
Okay, no refund of excess payments, so we'll move on to status reports. Ralph, do you have any reports for us?
Yep, I could report on two things. The first thing, I'll give an update with regards to the park. I will, and I don't remember on my last update what I passed on, but I think I was talking about we were hoping that Frontier was coming. So I will update everyone to say that Frontier did indeed come and move the wires that they had to move. Eversource pulled out the pole that had to be removed. There's some small things that have to be done around the area, but for the most part, what we're doing right now is trying to determine who has to approve the design and work that was done on Strickland, if Weston Sampson has to approve it, or if the DOT has to approve it. I put out the question to the engineer, and we're waiting to hear back to say who will have to approve it before we can open up Strickland. With regards to I know they were out there today working on the building itself. They're at finishing up some stuff on the building. The main thing we probably have left is that the vendors for the equipment for the splash pad have to come out and reprogram the controllers that are in the building because of final design changes that were made. So that's really the extent of it. We did meet, the park committee did meet and had conversations about the sign, the Park and Rec had met and talked about required signage at the park. So they had put together a draft. It was discussed with the park committee. So we're in the process of coming up with the final signage for the park. We also talked with regards to in terms of opening up the park, and that's still, I guess I'll say that's still in discussion. There's nothing definitive yet coming out. All I can say is I think we'll hopefully be able to finish it. The park will be complete, except for some punch list work, will be complete by the end of the month. But we'll try to figure out how we're going to proceed to opening up the park, given the challenges we faced with COVID. On the other side, with regards to COVID, probably just give an update for the participation I've had with with Park and Rec and with the schools. Park and Rec is hoping to make a decision in the next week with regards to summer camp. He's collecting information. Any guidelines I think that the director is going to see have come down. So there'll be some final discussions around the idea of opening up summer camp. Along the same line, the same thing has happened for the schools. The state came down with the rules on how the summer school would operate. And so they've just begun looking at that. There's a committee that is in the process of being formed, the school reopening committee, which will, I don't know, I don't think they may not get involved with the summer school component. They certainly will be involved with what's going to happen in the fall. So there's lots of review of these documents that have been brought down by the state. I guess the only thing I will tell you is that what is being identified for the guidelines is challenging. And I think I could, that would be the word that would best explain what we're seeing that has come down. It's challenging. In terms of thinking of an implementation, it's going to be a challenge. But at least now we have the guidelines. We waited for a long time. All the Park and Rec was waiting. The school admin was waiting, and now we finally have them, so they can review them and determine how they want to proceed.
Very good. Thank you for your report. Lou, did you have some information, or Rick Shar?
not an official committee report, but Lou and I are scheduled to meet. Actually, we're going to go out on the Connecticut River tomorrow morning and explore possible river access points. And we have a tentative meeting with the owner, one of the owners of Riverside and Yankee Marina, Kristen Borbo, maybe meeting us at 8 o'clock tomorrow. So we're still pursuing that. And I think, you've been on some of the emails concerning the other location and the NDDA study. So we're pecking away at that.
Thank you. So it's a lot of time and a lot of research involved with these endeavors, but well worthwhile. Lou, did you have anything to add?
I'll just echo with what Rick had said, is that, by the way, Rick, my kayak is on the car and it's full of water right now.
I thought about that, and I'm glad I didn't put mine on the car yet.
Anyway, it looks like, this is an opportunity. Rick and I had met with Mr. Petzel because we were talking about the Wongog Meadow at one time. And then he suggested, I think along with Mary Dickinson, is that maybe there's some other areas, and we do have a good sized waterfront area that is between the two boat yards, the Meriden Boat Yard and Riverside. So if there's some way that we can get to those areas without trying to get through the wetlands, then that would be a good idea. So this is a start. We're just going to explore it, and we'll see how we go.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay. Public comment? Kevin?
Yep, we have a comment from Bruce Graves. Hello, my name is Bruce Graves. As a person of color living in Portland, I am concerned about the language used in a lot of the comments tonight, that they can be seen as divisive and uninclusive. There are many races in Portland that could hear the specification of Black people and not feel their voices are heard or their concerns are acknowledged. I think it is important to ensure we are including all members of our community in these discussions and proclamations.
Want to read that again?
Sure.
I want to make sure I understand what he's saying.
Yep. So again, from Bruce Graves, as a person of color living in Portland, I am concerned about the language used in a lot of the comments tonight, that they can be seen as divisive and uninclusive. There are many races in Portland that could hear the specification of Black people and not feel their voices are heard or their concerns are acknowledged. I think it is important to ensure we are including all members of our community in these discussions and proclamations.
Is that the only comment?
And there's one more comment from Dave Murphy, 40 Carousel Drive. He's wondering if there are any updates on Brainerd Place, as it appears activity has stopped.
There is on the agenda for planning and zoning an acceptance of an application for some modifications to the approved site plan special permit. So it will be introduced at the planning and zoning meeting tomorrow, I believe. So that's the latest on that.
And that concludes the public comment.
Thank you. I'll turn it to the selectmen if there's any feedback from the comments that were received from you. Comments from you?
Susan, this is Mike. It's not directly related to what Bryan had said, but I've looked at the comments with regards to the protest march, as well as on the Portland Facebook page, and have found there's a great deal of divisive and downright wrong comments that have been put on there too. So there is an undertone in some of the threads I've seen out there on social media over the last couple of days that that I'm both embarrassed by and motivated to try to educate and change. But I don't know if that's where he was talking about to some degree, but that there is some language out there that's just quite offensive in our social media from Portland residents and folks around here. So.
Thank you.
One of the things I would suggest is that I'm hoping that our comments and the comments of other people seem to be sensitive to the issue and also proactive. I would suggest that Mr. Graves help us out in our plan for not only having a gathering to memorialize and also tell everybody how we plan to move forward in equity, racial equity. And when we put this plan together, that will be an extension of our diversity committee. That if there's things that we are not saying correctly, that maybe Mr. Graves can help us out. I would like his support.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, I think what he's questioning, I at least from what I'm understanding, what his comment was probably related. We do have the line where we say, the love and care of the Black community, people of color, and for all our neighbors. I'm not sure if he was saying to make sure that line encompasses everyone, because it's a show of solidarity, and it shouldn't be for that one community. It should be all inclusive. So I think that might have been what he was referring to.
Does he have a suggestion for a change?
Have you heard that, Bruce? If you want to add to the comment. He has submitted an update. He would suggest using people of all races or all community members, so not singling out specific groups.
All races and?
Or all community members.
Oh yeah, so instead of, I think, for love and care of Black community, it's maybe love and care of all community members and people of, instead of color, of all races and for all our neighbors.
Okay.
I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, Bruce agrees.
Okay. Want to say that again, Rick? Was that Rick who said that?
Yeah, I said, I think the sentence here, we stand for love and care of, forgot what I said here, of
all
the community
members,
or members of, let's see, wait a minute.
All community members, you want to
All
say.
community members and people of all races, or comma, it was after community, comma, people of all races, and for all of our neighbors. I actually don't have a copy of the official proclamation in front of me. I just have the initial letter, so I might be missing something. I have the first draft in front of me.
Yep. And is Mr. Graves indicating that?
Yeah, he agrees with the way that Rick phrased it.
Okay, good. I'll make those
Great.
changes with the approval of the selectmen.
That's good.
I approve.
I
By
agree.
consensus, that'll be a
I agree.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you, Mr. Graves, and thank you, Selectmen. Okay. Any other informal discussion? I will contact CCM and cost as far as the educational programs, as Kitch had suggested, for anti-bias, anti-racism, and other types of training. So I will look into that. And I have nothing under the follow-up items at this point. So if there's nothing further.
I have
yes.
a question for
Yes.
Susan on the follow-up items. With the land swap with the Exchange Club, did we sort of put that on the back burner because of everything else that was going on, and we didn't want to engage our attorney at the moment to review that, or what are we doing with that?
I thought our attorney was supposed to make some changes, and the problem is we had thought about sending that to a town meeting as well. Now, if the paperwork is all ready, we can send it to a town meeting and have the discussion similar to what we talked about earlier. It's just that as this COVID-19 goes on and on and on, and the decisions that we are making are not in keeping with our charter. And some you just have to do. You have to have a budget to get going, obviously, every new year. The question becomes, and it's our decision as a board, is it an item that requires action by this legislative body, or should it wait for the ability of a special town meeting to occur? And that was why I brought up the items associated with the copy machines. That's why I brought up the item associated with the Eversource LED lighting. As these things accumulate, it's more and more decisions that are being made by us and not by the way it is supposed to be in the charter. Now, we are allowed to do it if we feel that it is important to the continuation of the town, and it is of a nature that is necessary to be done. So that's why I haven't acted on that, because I didn't feel that was of a nature that was going to have a vital necessity of completion in a rep. So that's why I'm doing that.
All right.
And if you think differently, we certainly can proceed
Well,
with that.
the only thing, not so much for, the use of not so much per se toward the river access, even though I'd like to see that. But possibly if we're going to do some test wells up there, it might behoove us to have control of the entrance. Mm-hmm. And also, there's no money being exchanged. It's not like it's,
true.
It's pretty much a even swap almost. I mean,
mm-hmm.
Maybe the acreage isn't quite 1-for-1, but it's a pretty logical. The town's not losing anything, and it's not costing the town any money. And
the other land issue has to do with the Swedish cemetery that we need to proceed on too. So, I can regenerate those. Frankly, we've been very busy.
Right.
But now that the budget is completed, I can certainly put those back on the agenda. But I am very aware of what it is we're doing that is not in keeping with the charter. So I just want to make sure that I remind everybody of that, because while you're in the middle of this pandemic, it's one thing. But in another year or two, when hopefully we pray that it's over, I don't want people to look back and say, well, they made decisions that really were not appropriate. So frank, open discussion, transparency is important. So people who are watching these Zoom meetings, all of you when you're meeting in whatever capacity you can at this point with our constituents, I just want to make sure we're doing things correctly.
And Susan, I think that just like the other things that we talked about, we need to have a public hearing, we should have a public hearing on these issues, but I think we can move forward. There isn't a lot of dollars that we're talking about. So even though the charter does say if there's an expenditure of a certain amount, you have to have a town meeting. This is a little different in the sense that there is an expenditure of money, except maybe a minimal amount of money for the attorney to write up the meets and bounds papers.
Right.
So I would be in support of moving forward if we can, because we've been holding off on this for a long time and discussing this for a long time. It seems like it's an appropriate thing to move forward on, not only this one, but also the Swedish cemetery.
Very good. And I think when we craft the resolutions that go to the town meeting for discussion and then to you for a vote, that we make certain that we make reference to the governor's executive order, so that when people in the future look at whatever decisions are made, they understand the reasoning behind it. I find that as first selectman, when we're working on things, to look back and the decision-making that was made years ago is very helpful to us when we're then trying to do something similar at the present or in the future. So thank you for that input. That's very helpful.
Thank you.
With that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Rick. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Lou. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.